I didn't say anything when I heard them. That was the part that surprised me most, not what they said, but how quiet I stayed. My son was in the kitchen with his wife, and the door between us was cracked just enough. I had come downstairs for a glass of water. I was wearing my socks with the little grip dots on the bottom, the ones my daughter-in-law Christine gave me 2 Christmases ago, which I had always thought was her way of saying she worried I might fall. I stood on the bottom step, and I listened, and I did not move. "She'll slow down the whole check-in process," Christine said. She wasn't angry. That was the thing. She said it the way you'd discuss a weather forecast, practical, flat, already decided. You know how she gets confused with the kiosks. And then, security. Daniel. Last time, she set off the alarm 3 times. My son, my Daniel, who I had driven to baseball practice for 11 years, who I had sat beside in the hospital when he had his appendix out at 14, and he cried and held my hand, and I told him it was going to be fine, my Daniel said. "You're right. It'll be easier. Easier." I went back upstairs without my water. I lay in the dark in the guest room of their house, in the bed with the decorative pillows that you have to remove one by one before you can actually sleep. And I looked at the ceiling, and I thought about the word easier, as if I were a problem to be routed around, as if 68 years of living had made me into a detour. I want to be honest with you. I wasn't devastated. I had felt this coming the way. You feel a change in the air before rain, that particular drop in pressure, that stillness. It had been building since Robert died. Since the funeral, really. When I realized that the way people look at a widow is different from the way they look at a wife. A wife belongs somewhere. A widow is a loose end. What I felt, lying there in the dark, was something closer to clarity. I had already looked up the flights 3 weeks before that night. I had already entered my credit card number. I had already selected my seat. 2A. Window. Left side. So I could watch the sunrise over the clouds if we left early enough. I had already done all of that. And I had not told anyone, because some things you do not owe anyone an explanation for. The trip was Christine's idea, originally. Her college roommate had gotten married and bought a house in Scottsdale, and Christine wanted to visit. And somewhere in the planning, it became a family trip, and then a production, and then an itinerary printed in 2 copies with a color-coded schedule that Christine laminated and put in a clear folder. I had been included in the early conversations, then less so. Then I received the information as a summary. The way you receive the minutes of a meeting you weren't invited to attend. My ticket had been booked for me. Economy, middle seat. I knew this because Christine forwarded me the confirmation email, and the seat number was 24B. I had thanked her. I had meant it at the time. But that was before the kitchen, before the grip socks and the cracked door, and the word easier. The morning of the flight, I came downstairs with my carry-on already packed, and my good coat folded over my arm. The camel-colored one I bought in 1987 and have had professionally cleaned every other year since. Christine looked at my bag and then looked at me, and something shifted in her expression that she recovered from quickly. "Mom," Daniel said, and he had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We talked last night, and we think it might be better if you took your time getting to the airport. We're going to head out early and get the kids through security, and it might be less stressful for everyone if I what?" I said. He looked at Christine. "Take a car service," Christine said, and she smiled the way people smile when they are delivering something unpleasant in pleasant packaging. "So you're not rushed, so you can go at your own pace." My own pace. "That's very thoughtful," I said, and I meant that too, though not in the way they understood it. I called the car service myself. I had a driver named Earl who was 71 and had a pine tree air freshener hanging from his mirror and told me about his granddaughter's soccer tournament for most of the drive, and I listened to every word, and I was genuinely interested. and I tipped him 40% because I believe in tipping well and always have. At the airport, I did not go to the economy check-in line. I went to the priority line, the one with the navy blue carpet and the stanchions and the agent who looked up when I approached and said, "Good morning. Welcome to first class check-in." And I said good morning back and handed her my passport. And she found my reservation and printed my boarding pass and handed it back to me without any fuss at all. I did not set off the alarm at security. I removed my coat, my shoes, my watch, Robert's watch, the one I wear every day, silver with a worn leather band, and I placed them in the bin, and I walked through and collected everything on the other side with no difficulty. I have traveled alone since Robert died. You learn. The first-class lounge was on the upper level, past a door that required my boarding pass to open. I had never been in one before. I want to tell you what it was like, because I think it matters. It was quiet. That was the first thing. The kind of quiet that doesn't happen in airports. A managed, intentional quiet. Like someone had decided that noise was optional and chosen against it. There were wide chairs in a dark blue fabric, and natural light coming through tall windows, and a buffet with actual food, not the shrink-wrapped options I had been studying through the glass of airport shops for years. There were eggs. There was smoked salmon. There were small pastries arranged on a board the way you'd arrange them at home if you were trying to impress someone. I sat by the window. A young man named Thomas came to ask if I'd like coffee, and I said yes, and he brought it in a real cup, ceramic, not paper. And he asked if I took cream, and I said a little, and he brought a small silver pitcher and set it beside me. I sat there in the quiet with my coffee in a real cup, and I watched the planes on the tarmac, and I thought about Robert. He would have loved this. He was the one who always said we should treat ourselves better, that we worked hard enough, that there was no virtue in deprivation for its own sake. I had always been the practical one, the one who said next time, maybe next time. And then there was no next time for us together. And I had spent 23 months wearing practicality like a hair shirt, as if spending less somehow honored him. He would have hated that. He would have said, "Margaret, for the love of everything, go sit in the nice chair." So I sat in the nice chair. My flight was boarding at gate C-14. I did not rush. I finished my coffee and I ate a pastry and I had a second cup. And then I gathered my things and rode the moving walkway to the gate because it was pleasant to ride and I felt like it. When I arrived at the gate, the area was full. I spotted Christine first. She has very particular posture, very straight, and then Daniel. And then my grandchildren, Lily and Marcus, who were 11 and 8 and were sharing earbuds connected to an iPad. Christine was standing at the back of the boarding line, which had formed in the way airport boarding lines form a long, slightly chaotic chain of people pulling bags and checking phones and pretending not to be jostling. I did not join the line. The gate agent announced first-class boarding, and I walked to the front, and I handed her my boarding pass, and she scanned it and said, "Enjoy your flight." And I said thank you and walked down the jetway. I did not look back. I considered it. And I decided against it. My seat was everything to A, promised to be, wide, with a window, with a footrest, and a blanket in a sealed bag, and a small amenity kit in a white pouch. The flight attendant, her name was Renata. She introduced herself to each passenger, personally came to ask what I'd like to drink before takeoff. I asked for orange juice, and she brought it. And she told me that if I needed anything at all during the flight to simply press the button, that she was happy to help. When was the last time someone said they were happy to help me? I don't mean that bitterly. I mean it as a genuine question that I sat with, watching the plane fill up. I thought about the years of being the one who helped raising Daniel, keeping the house, taking care of Robert through his illness, answering every call from every family member who needed something, who needed me to manage and organize and absorb. I did all of it willingly. I want to be clear about that. I did not resent it. But somewhere along the way, being needed and being valued had gotten confused with each other, and when the needing stopped when Daniel had Christine, and Christine had opinions, and Robert was gone, I had become not just unneeded, but somehow also invisible. The curtain between first class and the rest of the plane closed. I felt that. The small, physical fact of the curtain. Renata came by to collect my juice glass and asked if I'd like a warm towel before takeoff. I said yes. It arrived folded in tongs, steaming slightly, and smelled of eucalyptus, and I pressed it against my face and held it there for a moment. I don't know why that undid something in me. Maybe because it was small and unnecessary and purely for comfort nobody needed me to have a warm towel. It helped nothing practical, and I had forgotten that things could exist for no reason other than comfort. I did not cry. I want to be accurate. My eyes were warm and I breathed carefully for a moment, but I did not cry. I was not sad. I was something else moved, maybe in the old sense of the word, like weather moving through. We took off into a clear morning. I watched Phoenix recede below us, and then we were in the clouds and then above them. And the sky was that particular blue you only see from altitude. A blue that has no buildings in it, no traffic, no opinions about your pace or your efficiency. I ate breakfast. Real breakfast, a plate brought by Renata with eggs and a small green salad and warm bread. I had the bread. I have been watching my bread intake for approximately 4 decades, and I have decided at 68 that bread is permitted. Bread is permitted, and I will have it. I read my book. I slept for 40 minutes. I woke to Renata asking if I'd like anything, and I said a glass of sparkling water would be lovely, and it arrived with a small slice of lemon pressed over the rim. When we began our descent, I folded my blanket out of habit, the same way I make the bed every morning, even in hotels, and I tucked it back into the seat pocket, and I looked out the window at Arizona. Spreading below us, tan and terracotta and green where the golf courses were, and I thought, I am glad I came. Not because of Daniel, not because of Christine, not to prove anything to anyone. I was glad because I had done a thing I was afraid to do, not the first-class ticket. That was just money, but the larger thing, the choosing of myself, the decision to stop waiting to be included and to simply include myself. The Phoenix airport was bright and loud and full of the particular chaos of people with places to be. I collected my carry-on from the overhead bin and thanked Renata, and she said it was a pleasure, genuinely, the way some people manage to mean it. I was walking toward baggage claim when I heard my name, Mom. Daniel was standing near the exit of the gate corridor, Lily on one side of him, Marcus pulling at his sleeve. Christine was a few steps behind, managing a stroller that belonged to some other family and had gotten briefly tangled with her bag. They had all just deplaned, funneling out of the back of the aircraft the way the economy cabin does a long, slow stream of people who have been waiting. I had been waiting at the gate for 7 minutes by that point. Daniel looked at me. He looked at my coat, my carry-on, the boarding pass still tucked in my outside pocket with the first-class logo visible at the top. His mouth opened and then closed. Lily said, "Grandma, you're already here." "I am," I said, and I crouched down a little to hug her, which took some effort on my knees and was completely worth it. Marcus said, "Why aren't you behind us?" with the directness of an 8-year-old, and I said, "I came a different way," which satisfied him entirely, because 8-year-olds do not require more explanation than that. Christine said nothing. She looked at the boarding pass, and then at me, and then at Daniel, and something passed between them that I chose not to interpret. "How was your flight?" Daniel asked, finally. "Comfortable," I said. Renata was wonderful. I did not explain who Renata was. I let him wonder. We took a cab to the hotel together, the 5 of us, which was fine. The children talked about the movie they had watched on the plane, and Daniel answered emails on his phone, and Christine gave the cab driver directions, even though he had the address in the GPS. I watched the desert pass outside the window and thought it was very beautiful in its flatness, in the way the light landed differently on everything out here. Christine's friend's house was in a neighborhood with very white walls and terracotta roofs and large agave plants in the front yards. We were not staying there wasn't room, but the hotel Christine had booked for herself and Daniel was nearby. A pleasant hotel, chain, 4 stars. My hotel was not the same hotel. I had booked it separately, 3 weeks ago, when I had also booked the flight. It was a small resort, 12 rooms, built around a central courtyard with a fountain and old mesquite trees and a pool that turned a particular shade of green in the afternoon sun. I had read every review. The person who responded to the negative reviews did so thoughtfully, which I consider a reliable indicator of character in a business. The cab dropped the others first. Daniel helped with the bags and then came to my window and said, "Where are you going, Mom?" in a voice that had more in it than the words held. And I told him the name of the resort, and he repeated it with a question in his voice. And I said, "Yes, that one." And I told him I'd see them for dinner, that Christine had sent me the reservation information, and I had it in my phone. He looked at me for a moment, really looked at me, and I thought I saw something shift in his face. Not guilt exactly. Something more like recalibration. "Okay," he said. "I'll see you tonight," I said. The resort was everything the reviews had promised. The woman at the front desk was named Rosa, and she came around from behind the desk to greet me, actually came around, not just leaned over, and she welcomed me and told me my room was ready and asked if I had any questions about the property. I had one. Was the pool heated? It was. I thanked her. My room opened directly onto the courtyard. There was a private patio with 2 chairs and a small table, and a jasmine plant climbing the wall in a way that seemed intentional, though it had probably been doing it for years regardless of anyone's intentions. The bathroom had a deep, soaking tub. There were no decorative pillows that needed to be removed before sleeping. There was a real blanket on the bed, heavy, the good kind, and 2 reading lamps positioned correctly, the way reading lamps should be, at an angle useful for actually reading. I unpacked. I hang everything immediately, always. Even in hotels, Robert used to tease me about it, called me the fastest unpacker in the West. I hung my things and put my toiletries in a line on the bathroom shelf, and I set Robert's watch on the nightstand, and I changed into my swimsuit and a cover-up, and I went to the pool. There was no one else there. It was mid-morning on a Tuesday, and the pool was still and green and warm, and I sat on the edge and put my feet in first and thought, yes. Just yes. Nothing more complicated than that. I swam for half an hour. I am not a fast swimmer, and I have never been. Robert was the swimmer. He grew up near a lake, but I am a steady one. I went back and forth, and the water held me, and the sky above the courtyard was the same altitude blue I had seen from the plane. And I thought, I'm here. I actually came. There is something specific about doing a thing you were afraid you wouldn't do. It's not pride, exactly. It's more like recognition. Like meeting a version of yourself you had begun to doubt existed. I showered and dressed and sat on my patio with a glass of iced tea from the small carafe Rosa had left in my room. The jasmine was very fragrant. A hummingbird came to investigate the plant and left, apparently unimpressed. I called my friend Patricia, who is 72 and lives in Asheville, and is the person who told me 3 years ago, when I was still very raw from Robert's death, that grief was not a debt I owed anyone. I told her about the flight and the lounge and the warm towel in the pool, and she laughed the way she laughs, full and without apology, and said, "Margaret, I have been waiting for you to do something like this." And I said, "I know." And she said, "How does it feel?" And I thought about it honestly before answering. The way she always makes me, like remembering something I forgot I knew, I said. Dinner was at a restaurant with a long communal table and fairy lights and a menu focused on local ingredients. Christine had chosen it and had good taste. I will give her that consistently and without qualification. The food was excellent. I arrived before the others. I was shown to the table and seated, and I ordered a glass of wine, a Grenache from Wilcox. The server recommended it. I told him I trusted his judgment, and I was halfway through it when Daniel and Christine arrived with the children, and then Christine's friend and her husband came, and the table filled up. Christine sat across from me. She looked at my wine and at my expression, and she said, very carefully, "Did you have a nice afternoon?" "I swam," I said. "The pool at my resort is heated." Something moved across her face. Not unpleasant, exactly. More like the particular expression of someone who is updating a calculation they had already believed was finished. "That sounds lovely," she said, and I thought she meant it. Lily sat next to me and told me about everything she had seen at the hotel, the elevator, the vending machine with the unusual options, a dog in the lobby, and I listened to all of it with full attention because children who are willing to tell you things deserve to have those things received properly. Marcus fell asleep in his chair before the main course arrived, and Daniel moved him to a booth nearby with his head on a folded jacket, and then sat back down, and he looked at me across the table the way he used to look at me when he was trying to work something out. "Mom," he said during a lull while Christine was talking to her friend. He kept his voice low. "I'm sorry about this morning. About the car." I looked at him. He is 51 years old. He has his father's forehead and my mother's eyes. And he has been, in many ways, a good son. People are not— "You thought it would be easier," I said. "That was wrong." "Yes," I said, "it was." He nodded. He had the grace not to over-explain, not to fill the space with justifications, and I was grateful for that. Some apologies are ruined by the addition of more words. "Your father would have bought the whole first-class cabin," I told him, and Daniel laughed, really laughed. The laugh he gets that reaches his eyes and said, "Yeah, he would have." We ordered dessert. Christine's friend's husband turned out to have opinions about Arizona history that were genuinely interesting, and I asked him questions and he answered them well, and by the end of the dinner I had learned 3 things I had not known before. I consider that a successful evening. The cab back to the hotels came, and I said goodnight to everyone. Lily hugged me for a long time without being asked. Marcus had woken up enough to say goodbye, and then fell asleep again against Daniel's shoulder. Christine said, "Breakfast tomorrow? There's a place Rose's is supposed to be wonderful." And I said yes, that sounded very nice. In the cab, I looked out at the Phoenix night, the palm trees strung with lights, the way the dark felt different here, drier, cleaner, and I felt something I want to try to describe accurately because I think accuracy matters here. I was not triumphant. I want to be clear about that. I had not set out to win anything, and I had not won anything. My son said something that hurt me and then apologized. And that is a human story, as old as there have been children and parents. Christine is not a villain. She is a particular kind of woman, organized and a little afraid and trying very hard to manage things that are not quite manageable, and I understand her better than she knows. What I felt was simpler than triumph. It was something like being reacquainted with my own outline, like stepping into a room you had forgotten was yours. My patio was cool when I got back. The jasmine had closed up for the night, the way jasmine does, saving itself. I sat in one of the chairs and looked at the courtyard, at the fountain running in the dark, at the mesquite trees standing very still. I thought about the warm towel Renata had brought before takeoff, the real coffee cup in the lounge, Thomas and his small silver pitcher of cream, Rosa coming around from behind the desk to say welcome. All these strangers, in a single day, who had offered me simple dignity, who had asked nothing in return. I took off Robert's watch and held it in my hand for a moment, the way I sometimes do. He had worn it for 30 years, and the leather still held some shape of his wrist. I thought about what he would say if he were sitting in the other chair right now, in the dark, listening to the fountain. I know what he would say. He would say, I told you. I told you to go sit in the nice chair. And I would say, I know, you were right. And he would say, you always knew. You were just waiting for permission. And I would say, I don't think I needed permission. I think I needed to remember that permission wasn't required. I stayed outside until my tea was finished. Then I went inside and turned down the heavy blanket and set my alarm for 7 early enough to watch the light change over the courtyard, which the reviews had mentioned and which I intended not to miss, and I lay down in the wide, quiet bed. Before I slept, I picked up my phone and looked at the confirmation email for the return flight. Still there. Still 2A. Still a window seat on the left side. I set the phone down. I turned off the lamp. I pulled the heavy blanket up and felt the particular, specific weight of it, and I thought, I will have the bread tomorrow too. I will have the bread, and I will swim in the heated pool, and I will watch the light on the courtyard in the morning, and I will tip well, and I will listen to Lily tell me about every dog she sees, and I will eat whatever I want from the menu, and I will not explain myself to anyone. The fountain was still running when I fell asleep. It sounded like patience, like something that had learned to keep going simply because going was what it did. I slept better than I had in months,